since hostages were taken by Hamas fighters in southern Israel in early October. He reiterated his commitment to rescue those who remain captive ahead of the upcoming election, where the pro-Israeli lobby yields a lot of influence. But Washington's handling of the Gaza conflict could impact on how members of the electorate vote. Let's get some analysis, joined now by International Relations Professor John Stremlau. Prof, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. I suppose let's start in Iowa. It segues nicely into the next conversation that we want to have. The CNN saying this was a very strong, was a stunning show of strength for Trump after leaving Washington in disgrace. You agree?
Well, he certainly left Washington in disgrace, but it was a predictable outcome given the attitudes that are reflected in the Iowa voters, who are a very, very small group of people, and particularly on a cold winter night, about 100,000 votes. So, you know, as Harry Truman said in 1948, the only poll that is reliable is the one on Election Day.
So you think this is not an indication of a likely possibility that Trump is going to mount a rather successful primary campaign?
No, it's not. But I was wrong in 2016, and my reference to Truman in 1948 was that was a surprise win for him. But he also was the first to recognize the state of Israel, and Joe Biden is old enough, and I am, to remember that moment. And so the Holocaust really did shape his and my generation, but fortunately I have been privileged to be in South Africa, so I see it from a different perspective.
Let's turn to President Biden, then. His handling of the conflict in Gaza. How has that worked out for him in terms of the popularity stakes?
Well, that's a good question, and we only have the polling as of now. New York Times Siena College published in December found that 57% of the voters were unhappy with his handling of the conflict. We don't know exactly why, but we do know that 72% of young voters, who is a crucial constituency and that played a big role in his stunning win in 2020, they are very unhappy and are very pro-Palestinian. So what I expect is that Biden is going to be pushing hard for a peaceful settlement, or at least a reduction of the violence in Gaza before the election. And in an ironic way, despite the fact that they disagree on policy overtly, I think South Africa is taking this to the World Court, could have a positive indirect impact on his mobilization of support for a ceasefire, or a reduction of hostilities at least, and an increase of humanitarian assistance at least.
Is Trump clear on his position on the Israel-Hamas war?
He's not clear on any position, except he talks a lot. And, you know, he did move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem with much criticism. He did get the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia between Israel and its neighbors, but it hasn't survived the Hamas incursion into Israel on October 7th, and the escalation of violence, which has been really, really punishing to innocent civilians and women and children in particular in the overcrowded apartheid-like homeland of Palestine, which has no independence yet. And you know, everyone equates Hamas and Israel, but it's not fair to create to compare a stateless terrorist group with a sovereign country, particularly one that has been armed as heavily as the U.S. assistance to Israel. Yeah,
he has, of course, in the past openly admitted a grievance against Netanyahu over that 2020 matter of the attack in Iran. Do you think he would have handled things differently?
Oh, I don't know. That's back then, but right now he certainly is as restive with Netanyahu, who is the most right wing and has never ever supported the two-state solution. And ironically, he was playing Fatah off against Hamas and being quite smug about it as he was pursuing relations with Saudi Arabia and others in the region. I don't think Iran was necessarily a factor in the October 7th pushing of Hamas, and I've written about that on the comparisons between Sinwar, who was in prison for almost as long as Nelson Mandela, but Nelson Mandela came out convinced that he could negotiate a settlement, and there's no leadership that is comparable to what we saw in this country available to the Palestinians and Israelis. But I would hope, at least as an interim solution, you have a two-state solution that everyone has been pushing for years, but the Israeli hard right is very much opposed to. They want to get ethnic cleansing.
Prof, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. International Relations expert, Professor John Stremlau there with analysis on the Gaza war and how President Biden has been handling that as he marks 100 days since those attacks.